Draw your strength from the Lord and from his mighty power. Put on the armour of God, so that you may be able to stand firm against the tactics of the devil. How do we do this? How can we stand up to the many tactics of the devil? Before I get to the heart of this, I just want to throw a resource out there for you. And this is a treasure that will help you avoid many of the tactics and schemes of the evil one. Find or print off or download a copy of the Rules for the Discernment of Spirits by St. Ignatius Loyola. It's a very useful and practical, it's a treasure of the Roman Catholic tradition. And it's great for helping you recognize whether you're dealing with God, whether you're dealing with yourself, or whether you might be dealing with something else. There is a strong critique of Ignatian spirituality among some contemporary modern Orthodox writers. I don't buy any of it. And if you are concerned about this, the line of thinking being that Ignatian spirituality is somehow incompatible with the Byzantine tradition, then talk to me or read the theologian Dumitrius Staniloe. One other comment. Sickness and suffering find their origin in evil and in the fall of humanity and the fall of creation. And the fathers of the church recognize this precisely in the gospel that we've just heard. Jesus puts the blame for her sickness right where it belongs, on the evil one. He says, Satan has held this woman in bondage for 18 years. So when you come across sickness and suffering, know where it comes from originally. It doesn't come from God, it comes from the world, the flesh, and the devil. Please don't think that suffering and sickness is God's doing. Now, I'm not saying that illnesses are caused by evil spirits, but I'm talking about where they come from originally. It's not from God. You know, I think some people have this horrible picture of God in their minds, that he spins a wheel every day to decide who is going to get cancer today, who is going to suffer today. That's not God. If anything, that's the enemy. I don't think God is the one looking for ways to make our life difficult or to spoil our enjoyment of life. Rather, God is the one who helps all of us towards healing in many different ways. He's the one who brings relief from sickness, comfort in pain, life out of death. And just because the cures that God brings us are not always miraculous, doesn't mean that he is not bringing healing all over the place. And as we do hear in the gospel today, sometimes God does bring miraculous cures, even in our day and age, because of his goodness and his love for us. Okay, so on to the meat of this. How do we stand firm? So to answer this question, I want to show you one of my favourite photos. And this is my wife Amanda with Sister Jean Marie from St. Stephen's. And Sister Jean Marie was a wonderful person, very easy to get on with, very easy to love. And Sister Jean Marie came to Amanda one day and said, I've got an extra ticket for this fundraiser, so please be my +1 to this fundraiser. And they went out and they had a wonderful night. They had far too much to drink, and this is the photo with their arms around each other. I'm sure you've all met Sister Jean Marie, and you'll remember what a lovely person, what a kind person, her smile, her patience, her kindness. And one day, when I had an office in the rectory at St. Stephen's, the internet across the whole cathedral campus went down for 2 weeks. Nobody knows how or why, but it was 2 weeks from hell. Can you imagine? No internet for 2 weeks. It was dreadful. I heard accounts of people screaming at each other there. And there were Episcopal mouths saying some very unepiscopal words. We'll leave it at that. Sister Jean Marie, meanwhile, merely expressed mild annoyance to me one day, saying, well, Deacon Adam, this loss of the internet is very frustrating, isn't it? And I said, yes, it is, sister, knowing that next door there's people ripping their throats out. So the best Sister Jean Marie story that I can tell you, and I can tell you this story now, is that one day she came to Amanda again with a big smile on her face, explaining that she'd taken herself out for a slice of pizza. There was a pizza place across the road from the cathedral, and she got talking to this lovely older gentleman, and he'd asked her out on a date for dinner. And she was still grinning from ear to ear when she told my wife all about this. And she said, "Oh, honey, that's lovely, but I really can't. I'm a sister, but thank you so much." And she was grinning like a cat. My point is simply that Sister Jean Marie was a person that it was very easy to put your arm around. She was a very easy person to care for and to love. Where do you think that desire to put your arm around a friend, to put your arm around a good person, where does that desire come from? And that desire comes from God. He is the one who teaches us to put our arm around one another. So if Amanda liked, as we all did, to put her arm around Sister Jean Marie, how much more did Jesus Christ put his arm around Sister Jean Marie? And how much more now does Jesus Christ have his arm around Sister Jean Marie? You'll notice the similarity with the icon that you might have seen on your way into church today. This is an old Coptic icon from Egypt, and it's now hanging in the Louvre in Paris. And this shows exactly what I'm talking about. Jesus Christ with his arm around his friend. This saint here was a local abbot of the monastery where this icon was excavated, and his name was Menas. And there was indeed a famous Coptic saint called Menas, but this isn't him. This is just a local abbot who had died and gone to be with the Lord. And so somebody wrote an icon of him. It's as if somebody here wrote an icon, say, of Father West. And there is Jesus with his arm around this guy. And you can see it better in this redrawing of the icon here. You can see that Jesus does have his arm around Menas' shoulder. You know, if we, with all of our faults and failings and shortcomings, like to put our arm around the shoulder of our friends, how much more does Jesus Christ have his arm around you and have his arm around me? You know, we can talk about theological concepts like justification and salvation and redemption and all these abstract terms. But if they don't amount to at least a hug at the end of a hard day, or rather at the end of a hard life, then what's the point? You might think I'm painting an overhuman picture of God, being over-anthropomorphic, but remember, Jesus Christ was true God and true man. And he is the one who told us a story about God's love with the parable of the prodigal son, whose father comes running to meet him when he sees him coming back and throws his arms around him in a huge embrace before he's even had chance to get out his prepared apology. And as we would say in England, that prodigal son was a bad lad. He'd been up to no good. And still, because of his great love, the father runs to him and throws his arm around him. And that's what God does for you, and that's what God does for me. And that love, that embrace, is the faith that you raise as a shield against whatever scheming tactics the devil is trying to pull on you today. Because you remember that you have a friend who is with you, who has his arm around your shoulder, and who promises you and has said to you, "I am with you always, even to the end of the world." This is how you stand up to the tactics of the evil one, no matter what they are. You know, I had a friend at the hospital, and she was telling me that her younger son, who was 5, was being bullied at school. And she wasn't sure what to do. And he has an older brother who is 8, but this kid looks like he's 12. He is a very well-built young man. And he said to her, "Mum, Which kid? And she says, well, no, the school has policies and procedures to help sort all this out. Mum, which kid? Tell me which kid. And she says, I don't want you hurting anybody. And he says, I'm not going to hurt anybody. Which kid? And Big Brother goes off to school the next day and the bullying stops immediately. I would love to have been a fly on the wall for when which kid met very Big Brother. We have a very big brother. We have a very big friend. And if you want to know how big, I hope you were listening at the Tropaz. When you descended into death, O immortal life, you destroyed Hades by the brilliance of your divinity. That's the friend you have when that bully is coming against you. Remember who has their arm around you. Remember to call your friend your very big brother, who is with you always and is the victorious King. Glory to Jesus Christ.